All right, ladies and gents, I just want you all to turn and wave at Miss Ray and say hello. I am at my daughter's school having lunch with her because it's her birthday and she requested it, so I figured you guys could do this on your own. All right, here we go. We're going to take a video. You're going to need your new note packet. If you don't have one from the front table, go get one. They're green. Pick them up. Fill this out as we go along. So chapter 5, we're working with triangles still, and this is our triangle proofs chapter. So two figures are congruent if they have exact same shape and size. All of the parts of the congruent figures are congruent to the corresponding parts. Basically, that's saying if I've got two triangles, I've got to list them in lots of different ways. So, to write a congruent statement, angle A, and angle is very important, is congruent to angle F, angle B is congruent to angle E, angle C is congruent to angle D. Okay, so that is the first thing I can list is since all the angles are congruent. What you're going to see is when I have this little congruent, when I've got A is congruent, you can also see F because it has the one line. Okay, don't forget about that. Okay, moving on to sides. AB is congruent to FE, BC is congruent to ED, and then AC and FD are also congruent. Make sure you have that line on the top. That is also key. And finally, since all three sides and all three angles are congruent, the definition of congruent segments or congruent figures tells me that if all three sides and all three angles are congruent, then the triangles are congruent. Amazing. Okay, moving on. So here it tells me that in the diagram, it tells me that TJM is congruent to PHS. Complete the statement. Now, I honestly don't even need a picture to do this because you can look and you can see that since I've got T, it's listed first as well as P. Okay, so anything that you're going to do, I line up with the statement that's listed here, and you know you never get it wrong. You can use the picture. I don't think you need it. So here we go. So it says that J is congruent to H because J and H are in the same place. Make sure that if it talks about the angle here, that you're also talking about the angle in your statement. Segment TM, which is first and last, which is segment PS, which is also first and last, which leads us to the measure of angle P, which we don't know what that is. You don't have to find that out. Is the measure of angle T. If we wanted to find that out, which we absolutely could, all you would have to do is find that T matches up with P. Look on the other triangle. Since we know that T is 73, we know that P is also 73. Now J gets a little harder. We know that it matches up with H, and neither of those I have an angle for. However, I know that this is 48, so if I take 73 and 48, subtract from 180, I get 59 for that one. So since we're looking for the measure, this is really what I'm looking for here is the number. But you can also put the extra measure of angle H if that helps you. Okay, so MT is the same as SP, which tells me SP is 5 centimeters, so that's 5 centimeters. And how I know that that's going to be a measure is because it doesn't have the line on the top. So since it doesn't have a line on top of it, I'm looking for a number. And then I've got triangle JMT, which is just a little jumbled up version of here, which we got HSP. All right, if you need more time, just take it and stop it, rewatch it if you need to figure that out, because I'm going to start going a little quick. Okay, QRST, WXYZ. I need to match things up. So if I'm trying to find X and Y, let's solve for X first. So if I'm solving for X, that would be W and Q. Those are equal to each other since they are congruent, so I'm just going to set them equal to each other and solve. Next thing I'm going to solve for is Y. Okay, so Y goes with WX and RQ. So if I look at my map, I see that WX and RQ are the same. I just have to line those up. Now, I already know X, so I can plug that in. So I know that 6 is equal to Y minus X. I know X, I can plug that in, and I can get then 18. All right, and we're going to move on. And now I've got the next example. Find the value of X and Y. Again, I'm going to look at the 1 mark right here and the 1 mark right here and know that those are congruent to each other. I'm going to know that A or B and E are also congruent based on the fact that these two other angles are congruent. So I'm going to say that those two angles are congruent as well. So I'm going to look at 129 is equal to 2y minus 3, which I can then solve and get 66 for y. And then I just have to do 1/2 x plus 1 is equal to 31. Move that around and get 60. All right, so the next problem I have, this one's a little trickier because it's not looking the same. So what you're going to see is that even though these angles are the same, okay, it's kind of like a flipped triangle. So this is the same as that, and then this is the same as this. And the reason I know that they're all the same is because we're working with congruent triangles. So I'm assuming that these are all the same as of right now. Okay, so I've got 56 here and 4x plus 2y. I've got 5x plus y and the other side, which I don't know that other side. So I've got to figure it out that it's 34. Now I've got two problems. I can do your loved systems of equations. So I solved it for y. I got y by itself. I then take this and plug it in for y. Right there. I can distribute. After I've distributed, I combine my like terms. After I do that, I move my 68 over, I divide by -6, and I get 2 for x. Now that I know x, I can pick either of my equations up here, plug 2 in for x, either here or here, and from there I can then figure out that y equals, let me scroll down a little bit, 24. Okay, write that down, take your time if you need to. All right, next we have third angle theorem. So, yep, we're throwing another theorem in there at you. So it says if two angles of one triangle are congruent to two angles of another, then the third angles are also congruent. Okay, then I want you to take a second and we're going to stop right here and we're going to look down because this is from the book. It says, in other words, for triangles ABC and triangle DEF, A is congruent to D, B, E, C, and E. Okay, so we're saying that if the angles are, two of them are congruent, the third one has to be. Okay, this theorem does not state that the triangles are congruent. That's because two sets of the angles are congruent. That doesn't mean that the sides couldn't be different lengths, like this picture. However, in this case, right up here, I want you to prove that ABC is congruent. Well, we can prove it based on the fact we can only prove it based on the fact that we know all the angles are congruent and all of the sides are congruent. So I have to go through and say, okay, so A is congruent to D, which means that B is congruent to E. So since I've got that using third angle theorem, I know that that's 3, guys. That means this is 3. Don't you love my lovely writing skills here? And then I can see that 12s, 13s, and 5s, ooh, that's a Pythagorean triple, that's a right triangle, is going to also be congruent as well. We're going to work on proofs next, so you don't really have to write a proof for this one. Okay, some things you do need to write down as a reminder. Properties of congruent triangles. You've got the reflexive property, so ABC is congruent to ABC. You also have the symmetric property, which says if ABC is congruent to DEF, then DEF is congruent to ABC. Remember, that's one I don't make you write a whole lot. Other teachers might, but I don't really care about that one. Transitive, our favorite, so I'll take substitution on this one as well. ABC is congruent to DEF, and DEF is congruent to JKL, so ABC is congruent to JKL. Make sure you write all those down. Okay. Now we're going to write our proofs, and I want you guys to write down all the givens. I am not writing down all of the givens, but I want you to, so please do that. Please make sure that you write those all down. I was typing, and so I saved some time. So you've got all your givens. You've got FH is congruent to JH. You've got that FG is congruent to JG. You've got that angle FHG is congruent to angle GHG. You've got that angle FGH is congruent to angle JGH. Okay, so we know that they're all given. What's the next thing I can find out? Well, I know that HG is congruent to HG because it's the same line. Look at that. It's reflexive. Okay, so you will actually use that term a lot when you're doing proofs for triangles. Next, we're going to move into the fact that since we know that the third angle is congruent based on third angle congruence theorem. So you're saying if two angles are congruent, then the third one has to be as well. So this one is congruent to here. That should have 3 lines, but you know how my writing is going, working with my mouse. And finally, we can prove that the triangles are congruent because by definition of congruent figures, if all 3 angles and all 3 sides are congruent, then the triangles are congruent. Voila. Moving on. Okay, so we know that ABD, angle ABD is congruent to CDB. So these are backwards. See how these are backwards here? We also know that ADB is congruent to angle CBD. They've already got marked for us. Okay, I know that AD is congruent to BC, which means I also know that AB is congruent to DC. And since I know all of these, write them all down for your givens, I can move on. Guess what? We're going to do this again. We know that DB is congruent to DB based on the reflexive. And since I know all that, I know that my third angles are congruent. Lovely drawing here. Wow, I need a pen. Wish I had a stylus like you guys do. Okay, so I know that those are congruent based on third angle congruence theorem. And then I can say that the triangles are congruent because all 3 sides and all 3 angles of each triangle are congruent to each other based on definition of congruent figures. Okay, here's what you're doing next. You are going to go into Google Classroom. There is a game, it's a practice. You have to get, it's through CK12. You have to get 10 of them right before it gives you like this big award and says, you're done, you've completed, do you want to practice more? So if you get them wrong, it will keep generating questions. I want you to get 10 of them correct. If you're logged in as in CK12 under your username, I will actually be able to look in and see that you've done it correct as well. So move on then, once you're finished with that, to your assignment 15.1. It is the next page in the worksheet. It's 15 questions, or in your packet. It's 15 questions, fairly easy. And if you get done, don't bother Miss Ray. Don't be talking. Sit down quiet. I don't want your names written down. I'm trying to give you guys a somewhat easy day. And if you haven't got your test back, somebody raise their hand politely and ask for them. All right. Miss you all. Love you all. Have a great day. And I'll see you tomorrow.